Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing well. Just want to say before I start the video, I just hit 200 subs, so thank you guys so much for that milestone. But we're going to talk about more disturbing songs today. As I said before, there are some entries on this iceberg which I will not be covering, either because I didn't have anything to say about them, or they were way too long. And this is a song's iceberg, not an album's iceberg. So displayed on the screen is tier 4. We'll call this the middle of the iceberg. This section consisted mostly of harsh noise music, but there was some other stuff in it too. So I guess let's just hop right in. Throbbing Gristle with Weeping. Throbbing Gristle is a name that appears quite a bit throughout the rest of this iceberg. So I looked them up on Spotify, and their bio is sort of telling us that they're like pioneers of the industrial movement. So like a lot of abrasive stuff you wouldn't hear in the mainstream, disturbing topics are a big part of what they did. This song here, I don't really hear industrial sounds, but it's definitely creepy. The song's kind of about not being noticed and specifically self-harm. At least that's how I interpreted it. The singing's super monotone and emotionless, and there's just no melody to it, and I think that's the creepiest part, and that's something I've noticed is going to be a theme with a lot of Throbbing Gristle songs. Next is an album called Spectrum Ripper by Masona, and Jesus! If you go listen to this one, be sure to have your volume turned down quite a bit. I saw later there on the iceberg there is a album that has a volume warning. I don't know why this one didn't have it, so I'm pretty scared to go check out that one. Yeah, as soon as I heard the first song on this, I couldn't go any further. It was too much for me. This screams in this absolutely pierce your ears. And I think what made this one so disturbing for me is it kind of reminds me of the Ruth Price 911 call. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up, but I would advise against it. The audio is extremely disturbing, definitely more disturbing than anything I found on this so far. So yeah, this is the first harsh noise entry we have. Very, very disturbing. Moving on. Next is Zuzu Zui Zui, I don't know their name, with I Love Abortion. I kind of interpret this song as like the mourning you go through if you do have an abortion, just the emotional weight that you're going to carry with it. It's very graphic, it's very real, very hard-hitting. There's a lyric in there that says, "When I look at my thighs, I see death," and that one is definitely a heavy one to hear. This is just another track that lyrically is more unsettling than the instrumental and content around it. Next is Aphex Twin with Number 21. This one I don't find as disturbing as the rest of the entries on this tier. However, it definitely leaves you a little bit unnerved. It's very desolate feeling. There's these very faint vocal samples that sort of haunt the track. It just kind of makes you feel like you're in some sort of afterlife that you don't really want to be in. Next on the list is Phantasmagoria by CCCC, and this is one very long harsh noise song. I started listening to it, and I kind of got the point, so I didn't listen to the whole thing, but I skipped forward to parts, so I had an idea of if anything changed drastically. It's not nearly as abrasive as the Masona record, but maybe that's because I learned to turn my volume down before I started checking out the rest of these tracks. The noise kind of gets more urgent as the song goes on. Towards the end of the album, there's these faint siren sounds, and they're paired with some beeps and a couple noises that sound like distorted children's toys. So I found that pretty intriguing. Yeah, just another harsh noise album. Next is called Mian by Hayo Kaiden. This one started out normal enough, you know, your typical 30 seconds of ambient drony noise. And then it turns into a jump scare of noise music, which going through this list, they become less and less of jump scares and more so expectations. The thing is with all these harsh noise songs is it's very hard for me to critique them because, to be honest, they kind of all sound the same to me. I know that's sort of an insult to the artistry of these, but yeah, I can't really distinguish a difference. However, I can tell a difference in how disturbing each one is. So as we move along the iceberg, I will kind of rank them in order of disturbance. So far, this is definitely less disturbing than the Masona album. Masona is definitely the most disturbing harsh noise record thus far. Next is Caught by Swans. Swans is a band I have heard of many times, heard a lot of praise about them, but I had never actually listened to them. This song is a disturbing track about police brutality. The lyrics are very disturbing, about a cop that has a club and is going to do terrible things to the people with that club. Definitely unnerving hearing it for the first time. However, there's a bridge towards the end of the song where the lead vocalist just screams, "Heat hurts," for like 2 minutes straight, and I thought that was the most disturbing part of the song. Definitely sticks with you, but I guess I have a deeper aversion to harsh noise because all the harsh noise songs are a lot more unnerving to me thus far. Next is called Licking the Fig Tree by Black to Calm. To me, this was the most enjoyable entry on the list so far. It has these dark organ keys that take up most of the track, but then there's these distorted horns that sound extremely disoriented, like they shouldn't really be there. It's one of those tracks that give you a more dreadful feeling than a noise disturbance, we'll call it. And as I'm figuring out as I go through this Iceberg, there's definitely more than one way to be disturbing through your music. Next is called Bathory Erzsébet by Sun O. So some context for this song. Elizabeth Bathory, or Báthory, was a Hungarian noblewoman and one of the earliest known serial killers. She would kill virgins and bathe in their blood as a way of maintaining her youth. So, on to the track. The lead vocalist for this band was extremely claustrophobic. And it turns out he sung the lyrics inside of a coffin. So 7 minutes before he starts singing, there's this bell that rings for 7 minutes, and it leaves you with this intense anxiety. And it's actually like a scientific thing about why that happens. But I found that really cool. And then eventually it turns into a sort of metal riff and this dude kind of growling in his coffin. He almost sounds like a zombie waking from the dead. This is one of those tracks that, although it's on this Iceberg, it's one I definitely encourage you to check out. Apparently this genre is called drone metal. I had never heard any drone metal up to this point, but if you're interested at all, definitely give this one a listen. Found it super interesting and enjoyable. Next, by Venta Protesics, Futuristic Computer Sex. This is another harsh noise song. I found this one the least disturbing out of the 3 harsh noise songs we mentioned earlier, mainly because it's only like 3 minutes and the album cover is colorful, so I don't have any commentary to add to this one, just harsh noise for 3 minutes. Next is called Practice of Hygiene by Pandijin. This one is gross. As opposed to noise or disturbing lyrics, this one is a little bit different. It starts off with a little spoken word intro, and then comes some small piano notes, and then comes bodily sounds. It just sounds like 2 people doing it and crying while they're doing it, and by the end it just sounds like they're throwing up. It's just really gross overall. Another way of being disturbing. I don't like how clean the noises sounded. You could clearly hear everything. It would be like me going up to this microphone and just going like for like 5 minutes straight. So yeah, this one was nasty. Next is Michael Gira with You See Through Me, and Michael Gira is actually the leader of the Swans? Not the Swans, just Swans. Get it right, Luke. But this song starts off with an ambient noise mix and transitions into an acoustic guitar lead, accompanied by some fainter piano keys. And then it becomes something I've never heard before in a song, and that is an entire conversation with, I presume, a husband and a wife. The whole gist is the wife wants to help this husband out of his alcoholism addiction, but he changes the subject and doesn't pay any attention to this woman, and it's just completely disrespectful. Yeah, this song definitely hit me in a certain way. It's disturbing, and once again, a different way, and this is another one I'd encourage you to check out if you haven't heard it. Next is called Hanging Garden by Steve Roden. Steve Roden is the name of the same person who brought us the album Forms of Paper, which was a record made entirely with the sounds of paper. Unfortunately, this one is a lot creepier than paper folding. There's drone noise in the background and faint church-like piano keys, but the creepiest thing are definitely the vocals. They sound straight out of a horror movie. It sounds like a seance of some crazy dude trying to summon a demon. I dare you to stand outside at midnight and listen to this in the dark. Actually, don't do that. It sounds like a terrible idea, and it'll lead to many mental illnesses for you, so I take that back. Moving on to Tier 5, which I'm going to call the bottom of the iceberg. I have it displayed on the screen. This section kind of shifts away from harsh noise, but still has some of it. I would just call it a big goodie bag of everything we've covered so far. Coming in first is Hell Driver by the Georgie. This song, I can't describe it as any other word except bleak. There's this static that plays throughout the entire thing, which is actually louder than the song itself. The only thing in this song really are these faint, bleak piano keys. This song just leaves you feeling empty, and I can't really say anything else about it. This is what I imagine plays in hell. Next is called Ban This Book by American Pleasure Club, and I was surprised to see that this was released under Run for Cover Records, which one of my favorite bands called Crying is on that record. This is another harsh noise song, but it's a little bit different than the typical ones that we covered in Tier 4. It starts off with these slinky-like drums and then jump scares with these harsher noises. It's definitely a more anxiety-inducing noise project. The way I would describe it is someone trying to escape from their anxiety, but they can't. They're stuck with this anxiety for their entire life. Every time they try to escape, it just grabs them and pulls them back in. Next is called Please Don't Leave Me by Uboa. And straight off the bat, I was disturbed by this one. It's super noisy. There are lyrics to it, and I actually looked at the Genius interpretation. And the Genius interpretation is actually by Uboa themselves, so we have a good idea of what the song's about. Basically, they said that it's about being blamed for something you didn't really do, accused for something you didn't really do, but everyone believes you did that and you have absolutely nobody on your side. The lyrics start off saying, I didn't do anything, yet you punished me like this. I didn't do anything wrong, yet you punished me like this. And it just gets noisier as it goes on. Yeah, this one was definitely unnerving. Next is the live version of Coward by Swans, and I'm going to read the Genius annotation for what the song is entirely about. So here we go. In this song, the protagonist begs to be punished for being weak. The abuser is reluctant to hurt him, though, because he is dissipated into a shell of a person who is unrecognizable at this point. And how can you hurt someone deep down if there is nothing to hurt? He then tries to use his love for the abuser as incentive for the abuser to continue hurting him. So right off the bat, we have a masochist begging to be beaten even more, which, geez, that's pretty graphic and brutal right off the start. Loud guitar riffs give off a dreadful feeling, and this same riff continues for pretty much the whole 10 minutes of the song. And lyrics just scream useless and stick your knife in me. Yeah, this one was intense. Next is called Pink Noise by Junko and Matin, and this song was anything but pink noise. As soon as it started, I knew I wasn't going to sit through the whole thing. I had my volume turned almost all the way down because this had a volume warning, and it still sounded loud even with it turned down that much. By far the most disturbing thing about this is the girls' screams and just how they continue and continue and continue. I would definitely consider this the most disturbing harsh noise song on the entire Iceberg, by a pretty large margin, although Masona's not far behind. Next is called Jordan, Minnesota by Big Black. Jordan, Minnesota, at the time this song was released, it had a bit of a dark history. It was a town known for a terrible, pedophilia plague. And so a bunch of investigators went over there to find out the truth behind all this. And someone on YouTube said, I quote, "An overzealous investigator caught on to allegations of molestation in Jordan and began to dig so hard for confessions, children often said they were molested just to give the investigators the answers they wanted." So I don't know if that means this whole thing was a hoax, and this investigator just wanted a good story, or what. It's still disturbing, though, because this kind of thing definitely happens in small towns like this. I think the most disturbing thing about this song, the most disturbing lyric is, "and this will stay with you until you die," because if you're a kid and something like this happens to you, like, that's gonna mentally affect you for the rest of your life. So that lyric is super haunting. Yeah, the backstory for this is just super disturbing. So next is called Showa by the Georgigi. It begins with the Japanese national anthem, and it ends with the Japanese national anthem. In between those two sets of the national anthem is an entire 30 minutes of sex. I'm not kidding. Two real people were going at it, and it's now a song. It is very gross. I don't know how it is allowed on YouTube. I won't question it. I don't really think it's disturbing. It's just kind of gross, like the other one in Tier 4. To me, it just sounds like low quality porn. No offense. That is the end of Tier 5, so we're moving on to Tier 6. Here it is, and I'm going to call it The Abyss. For a lot of these, I took quite a bit of notes, so I'm going to be looking back and forth to my computer. But the first record on this tier is called A Sucked Orange by Nurse with Wound. I'd heard of this record before going into the Iceberg, so I kind of knew what to expect. I checked out a little bit of it, but I never listened to the whole thing. But what I wrote was, this album is purposefully a cohesive mess. It starts off with a ukulele and the dude's playing it like really aggressive. It sounds completely messed up, but it's not the worst thing in the world. But then these scratching noises come in and just make it really annoying to listen to. Then it turns into this spacey atmospheric vibe, which is definitely the most enjoyable part of the record. Then some passive aggressive lady giving a speech, and then more scratching noises, and then people obnoxiously and unnaturally laughing, and then screaming, and then a little vocal sample, and then spacey noise, and that's just part 1. Part 2 starts off more urgent with some drum beats, and then what sounds like some awful bird screeches, and then the drum beat changes, and then this guy says Rocket Morton for the entire last 4 minutes of the album. This is definitely not what I expected when I went into this. It's definitely pretty unnerving, but I think there are entries on this tier and this Iceberg that disturb me more than this one. But that could just be because I was already familiar with it. Next is called Faust by Current 93. I knew of Current 93 before this, as I had a buddy have me listen to Thunder Perfect Mind, which is a neo-folk record by Current 93. And this Faust track right here, I don't know what it is, but I don't think it's neo-folk. I watched the YouTube video of it, and I guess it is a movie called Faust by F.W. Murnau. It definitely accompanies the song well and makes it a little bit creepier. It is already creepy enough, though, because it sounds like you're in a graveyard, and you're never going to escape that graveyard. There's these whispers in the sort of instrumental of the song, and they continue for almost the entire 36 minutes. So to just have whispers in your ear for that long can't be good for the human psyche. So yeah, this one was definitely pretty disturbing. Next is called Hamburger Lady by Throbbing Gristle. And guys, when I first looked at this Iceberg, out of curiosity, I looked at the bottom and I listened to a couple things from the bottom to sort of give myself an idea of what I was getting into, because I wanted to make sure I could do this whole thing without being too disturbed. Yes, I'm a little bitch. And I listened to Hamburger Lady, and I was like, okay, this isn't too bad. It's not too disturbing. It's definitely eerie and creepy, but it's whatever. And then I saw YouTube comments that the song is actually about a burn victim, and people would say that she looked like hamburger meat, like she was that like burnt by the event, that her body looked like hamburger meat. And like, no one would ever stay with this woman for long because they couldn't look at her. And I thought that was an extremely disturbing backstory. But that's not where I got too disturbed by the song yet. The night after I listened to this song, I had a dream, and this song was just playing in my head during the dream, and that freaked me out. So going back to this, I didn't re-listen to this song because I'm too scared to. And this didn't happen until after my dream, and like a day after I listened to Hamburger Lady, that it just gave me so much anxiety even thinking about it that I'm not going to listen to it again. I don't know if the song's cursed or what, but I'm never listening to Hamburger Lady again. Next is another Current 93 entry called I Have a Special Plan for This World. This combines a poem by Thomas Ligotti with the band's manipulation of sound, and David Tibet, the leader of Current 93, narrates this poem. Doom is a great word to describe this. I can't critique it too much because it's not really a song, but there's definitely an element of dread to it, and it's definitely disturbing without a doubt. Next is Shoo Shoo with Mary Turner, Mary Turner. Yeah, apparently I've been saying it wrong the entire video. So it's Shoo Shoo, not Zuzu, not Zoe Zoe. Anyway, this song, like many Shoo Shoo songs, is based on real life events. And what I'm about to say is extremely graphic, extremely sad, and extremely disturbing, so this is your warning if you don't want to hear it. But in May of 1918, in Georgia, there were lynchings. A couple named Hazel and Mary Turner were killed during it, but the worst part of it is that Mary was hung, doused in gasoline, and then they set her on fire. But it gets even worse because Mary was pregnant with an unborn child that they literally cut out of her body, threw it on the ground, and then stomped it to death. And then afterwards, they shot Mary over 200 times. All because some assholes didn't like the color of her skin. And nobody was ever convicted of this crime. So reading up on this story really pissed me off. But as for the song, the lyrics are extremely accurate to the story. The vocalist sounds like he's on the verge of crying the whole time he's singing these lyrics. And I mean, I don't blame him. This is an extremely heavy thing, and I think this is probably the most disturbing thing on the entire Iceberg, just because this really happened. Yeah, definitely one of the most intense entries on here, so we're going to move on. Next is called Suicide by Frankie Teardrop. This is one some of you might be familiar with. This song is about a desperate man who isn't making enough money, doesn't have the greatest life, and is just straight up miserable. So to take his misery out on people, he goes into his house, first kills his kid, and then he kills his wife by shooting them in the head. This isn't a true story, but a YouTuber commented on the song and said it best, that the most disturbing thing about this is that this story has probably happened over 1 million times. I think something very disturbing about the song itself are these abrupt screams that come up like after these events take place. But yeah, this is another very intense track that definitely not for the faint of heart. So next we have another Throbbing Gristle song called Slugbait, and this one doesn't have lyrics, but it definitely shows the industrial influence that Throbbing Gristle has more than any of the other songs on the Iceberg. The way the noise is set up in the song, by like the halfway point, you feel like you're going deaf in your left ear. And I think that's the most disturbing thing about it, is just the way it manipulates your hearing. I don't know if this is like a scientific thing or not, or if they knew that this was going to do this to people. But yeah, if you don't like your body being manipulated, don't go listen to this song. It's not really that disturbing outside of that, but it's crazy that just a song could do that to your ears. And finally, we have Birdseed by White House. This one isn't a song, but more of a spoken word interlude. Straight off the bat, it's extremely hard to listen to. It's all about real victims from everything, including sexual abuse to people killing their loved ones, to the killers of the loved ones. I didn't sit through this whole thing because throughout like the first couple minutes I got the point, and I didn't want to hear any more sad stories because I just listened to some extremely heavy stuff. Anyway, guys, that is the end of the Disturbing Songs Iceberg Part 2. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you like this sort of thing, let me know of an iceberg you'd be interested in seeing. I'm glad you guys tuned in. Happy to have you. Make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. I will have more coming your way soon. So thank you, and I will see you again later.